All right. Hello, everybody. It's 4:30. Everybody's eager to get to happy hour, I'm certain of it. But we are going to talk about some exciting stuff before you do that. Everybody's here at a hardware show. We're going to talk about circular data centers and a new product line which helps maximize the value of the lifetime value of IT hardware. I think probably anybody who's at the show cares about that. In a pretty new and disruptive, innovative way in a product line called Sesame, which we will introduce in full detail, as well as bring up a very exciting partner of ours who's working with Sesame to do some massively modern and disruptive applications, which I will let them tell you about. So first, who's IT Renew? For people who don't know us, we are the leading provider of data center decommissioning services globally, which means that we work with pretty much all of the large-scale and hyperscale data center operators. You can see some of the logos at the bottom of this slide to help them handle equipment, massive amounts of equipment that comes out of data centers as it gets refreshed and as it exits sort of its first end-of-life period. That involves a massive global operations and logistics engine. And increasingly now it involves what we're going to talk about today, which is product innovation, because the combination of those two things enable us to kind of fundamentally rethink, redefine, and maximize lifetime value of IT hardware in ways that haven't been done in the past. So we're going to talk about those things, but we already, even as we stand at the beginning of kind of this next chapter of circularity, we've already returned over $1 billion of value in the form of TCO to our major hyperscale partners. So those things collectively kind of give us the foundation now that we need to catapult into the next chapter where there's a lot more opportunity to be had. So before I go into kind of what that opportunity looks like from a financial perspective, I want to talk about give you a visual for what a circular data center is. So circular economy principles generally say, hey, we live in a world that's very linear. We take a bunch of things, we make a bunch of stuff, we try to sell it, and then we dispose of it as quickly as possible in some cases so that we can sell more stuff. And it turns out that that's not only very wasteful from a sustainability perspective, it's also incredibly wasteful from a financial perspective. So a circular data center seeks to do things differently there, and in other words, not dispose of things as quickly as possible, but rather actually uphold the value of those assets and keep them in service as long as possible and maximize the lifetime. Now that doesn't mean suddenly every data center is going to run things into the ground. What it means is that we think holistically about what a lifetime is across multiple use cases and multiple lifetimes. So in the past, to make it very tangible, we used to take equipment out of large-scale data centers and then we would harvest it for parts and sell it off what we could and recycle the rest. That's sort of the least worst thing that you can do. And now what we do, now that we have not only the global services and operations engine, but also the product innovation, now we're able to look at the kind of end-of-life trajectory of equipment very differently. So now we look at things like, okay, well, what equipment can be reused and what cost avoidance do we get from the benefit of doing that? And then what equipment can be recertified as systems and sold into other secondary data center environments? What can be remanufactured and sold into non-data center, but system-level solution deployments? And then only after that do we think about harvesting components and selling them off and recycling. And what you do when you do that is you think about optimization of the mix across those pathways and you achieve outsized financial returns. So why do we care about that other than we like financial returns? Well, these are really, really big at the scale that this industry operates. So somewhere north of $50 billion of value is currently being kind of left on the table or falling through the cracks in the hyperscale arena alone. That's only like the top 5 to 7 companies that have more than 500,000 servers. Huge opportunity that is currently kind of dead weight loss that can turn into product opportunity for downstream markets. And that value recovery kind of pairs nicely with that downstream opportunity, which is estimated to be about $10 billion a year of market that is currently blocked by a combination of things. Lack of budget. Purely budget constrained environments can't afford to do what you'd like to be able to do. It's constrained by traditional business models, traditional economics of solutions and how those channels get activated. And so those two things kind of make a nice glove, but you got to figure out how to link them up, and that's what we're going to talk about today. Before we do that, there's also, on sort of the imperative side of this, if we've talked about the financial opportunity, we still have half the world that's not online. That represents kind of an imperative to achieve universal access. There's also a massive economic growth opportunity that comes with that, and it creates opportunity for the whole global market. And we frankly, as we scale, have data centers that we do a tremendous amount of good with technology. They also carry a tremendous amount of cost with them. One of those costs is, from the IT hardware perspective, is we create a ton. We create many thousands of tons of potential waste, and circular data centers stand to divert that into multiple lifetimes, as opposed to going more directly into the variety of waste streams, be it recycling or the landfill or otherwise. So we think there's this huge opportunity. We know there's this huge opportunity, and the question then becomes, okay, well, how do you link up that $50 billion opportunity for hyperscalers with the $10 billion a year opportunity that is in need and currently starved? And the essential link becomes product innovation. We're going to talk about it, but if you think very simplistically about what I just described, historically, on the upstream side of the market, people who are getting rid of equipment at the end of life, they got some small amount of value for selling those components. And when you think about now you can sell systems, suddenly you get much higher value. So you get to capture a lot more dollars to add to your own lifetime value. On the flip side, you have markets which are budget constrained and have hard time getting access to equipment, so their options are limited and they're very expensive. So suddenly when you introduce recertified equipment, right, so you got recertified on the left creating value, and now you have recertified on the right creating value, and the link becomes, how do you bring that recertified product to market? What does it take to do that? It's not as simple as saying, hey, I got a bunch of stuff, I'm going to throw it over the wall to somebody else. There's much more involved in that. But it's here, it's on display in the booth over there, and it's very much live in the marketplace. And I'm going to turn over to Aideen, the CEO of ITRenew, to take you much more through in detail exactly what that involves to bring this to market and how it's coming to market today.
Excellent. I appreciate it, Ali. So Ali talked a little bit about the circular data center in concept, and really, how do we actually operationalize this thing, right? How do we actually make it come alive? And there's a couple things that are very important. Obviously, open is crucial and necessary for us to be able to do the things that we do, whether it's an open hardware, whether it's OpenStack, the community itself. It is absolutely essential. The flexibility, the fact that it's agnostic, it provides a lot of opportunities for us to leverage this ecosystem to do the things that we want to do and be able to take a circular data center strategy and bring it to life and actually operationalize it. A lot of this would not be possible leveraging some of the traditional legacy OEM gear. Now, while open is necessary, it's not sufficient by itself. As you guys may know, may not know, today, outside of the hyperscalers, OCP only makes up 1% of the overall server market. And out of the ODMs, only 4.5% of ODM gear actually is OCP out of their entire market share in the space. So open itself is necessary, but alone it's not sufficient to actually be able to operationalize this stuff. So for us, we're looking at an ecosystem where you have to be able to do product innovation. You have to be able to bring new things into the market in a way where it fundamentally changes the mindset of people, and it brings new things that are fundamentally going to change the way that we approach this ecosystem. And it's a combination of design, it's a combination of open, it's a combination of a global footprint of logistics, distribution channels. All of these things are extremely important for us to be able to penetrate and bring what we want to say is this circular data center to life. So what we believe is that the market is ready, the services are ready, and to this point, the product has to actually meet this demand. And there needs to be this gap that is filled. And we believe that Sesame, a product of ITRenew, will be able to do this. So what is Sesame? So Sesame is a first of its kind recertified compute and storage product. It is actually enabled by the close relationship and the partnership that ITRenew has with the hyperscalers. It is also enabled by the fact that there is the availability and the consistency of supply, and that's extremely important. For folks that want to buy one server to hundreds of thousands of servers, that's essential. It is also extremely key, it is also extremely key that you have a global logistic and distribution footprint to bring this to market. And the other thing is there has to be a comprehensive recertification and remanufacturing capabilities to actually make this a quality product. Because when you're talking about recertified, the things that always are on the top of people's mind is whether you can actually bring something of quality to the market that people can depend on and build an infrastructure around. So speaking of the quality aspect of it, one of the first questions anybody that asks that is looking at recertified gear for the very first time is it of quality? Am I going to get higher failure rates? Those are all a legitimate and fair concern to bring up. So one of the things that we did was over the last 18 months and us putting thousands of different servers into the market, we actually work with our partners to track failure rates. And what we found out is that the aggregate failure rate for the equipment that we've recertified and that are actually in operation are actually 0.25%, which is significantly better than what you find of brand new gear. And it makes sense if you actually think about it. These systems have been in operation in a hyperscale environment for 2 to 3 years. They've been burn tested. Any components that would have failed in the first 6 months have already been replaced. So when they come to us, they are high-performing, high-quality systems, and our recertification processes actually validate that. So because of that, we're actually able to put products in the market and fully warranty those to provide assurances to this secondary market for recertified gear to be able to drive value. Not only for the folks that are buying, but also value for the hyperscalers that are looking for alternatives to just recycling or being able to just sell the components out of their systems. So if you look at the comparative economics of this, we just kind of took one example. We actually compared a Sesame server that's based on the Leopard architecture with these specs, and we compared it to a Dell R730. So basically you get identical, very close to identical performance and configuration, same compute, same performance for essentially half of the cost. So you can look at it in two separate ways. You're either cutting your CapEx in half and getting the same performance, or you're maintaining CapEx and getting twice the compute cycles. Either way, that is a disruptive economic model that we believe will power the proliferation of these systems into certain spaces. As Ali mentioned, there are budget-constrained environments that will find this extremely attractive. So the last part here is really what we believe is Sesame for everyone. We actually want to democratize, if you will, the access to open compute and open hardware for everyone. Today, in the ecosystem that exists, in the channels that currently exist, if you want to buy open hardware gear, whether it's OCP or otherwise, even if your volumes are of substantive scale, 1,000, 2,000, 10,000, you'll sometimes might find it hard to be able to get the ODMs to provide you with that unless you're ordering in magnitudes of hundreds of thousands. So even if you're a smaller player, like an SMB that wants to even maybe buy one server or maybe 10 servers, I mean, you're completely out of luck. There's no way you're going to get access to that. So one of the things that we did was we actually created a chassis. It's a Discovery chassis. And this actually allows us to be able to put the same exact server that was on the previous slide, the Leopard server, either in one node or up to 5 nodes, and essentially bring OCP to folks that would otherwise not have an opportunity to buy it. And you can literally buy one OCP server with the Sesame product line, which I think would be extremely hard to find anywhere else. So there's a lot of things. I mean, this thing is already in action, guys. I mean, look, we've already sold into all the geographies around the world, whether APAC, South America, Europe, North America, into cloud, gaming, crypto, into higher ed, government. This is already happening. We have already been able to penetrate some of these markets, and we're really looking to scale over the time that's come. One of the very interesting applications for our product line, the Sesame product line, that's based on the hyperscale gear we get, is really edge computing. And one of the customers, or one of the partners that we have, EdgeX, that I'll introduce, is going to talk about their new offering. It's a new edge computing platform that's based on blockchain technology. And I'm going to introduce James, who's going to walk you through that and explain all the benefits that they bring to the market. And their solution has been built and is being built on the Sesame product line. So James Thomason, I'd like to introduce you to the group.
Thanks. Wonderful, thanks, Ideen. Make sure they told me to stay in the lines here. My name is James Thomason. I'm the CTO and co-founder of EdgeX. We're a startup company here, headquartered in Raleigh, North Carolina, and based also here in Silicon Valley. And I'm excited to tell you why the circular economy is so important to us as a young startup company who is trying to change the world. And I'm going to show you something really different. This is actually our coming out moment as a startup company. Very few people have seen this before, set eyes upon it, but I think you're going to find it really interesting. Most of us are probably aware of the Internet of Things and the edge problem today. We talk about the proliferation of devices at the edge being in the billions, tens of billions, and eventually hundreds of billions. What doesn't get talked about much is the corner many of us here have painted ourselves into by virtue of centralizing our computing capacity over the last 10 years. We've been very successful building hyperscale facilities. The problem that we've created out of that is that all of these edge devices are out there generating data. And in majority today, the edge data is going unprocessed. Only about 10% of the information that's generated at the edge by connected things and devices is usable, but the vast majority of that is unprocessed. So if you look at, in just the next few years, by 2021, there's already a 64 zettabyte shortfall between the amount of data generated at the edge that is usable and the amount that we can process by backhauling that over network back into our centralized data centers. So what happens is that data gets left on the devices, eventually rolls over, gets discarded, et cetera. This is a problem because we think we're about to enter a new era of computing where computing is moving out of the realm of the abstract and into the real world. So instead of just driving our spreadsheets and web browsers and mobile applications, computing is now going to drive our cars, operate heavy machinery, control pumps inside of refineries, factories, other places, and really become a part of our everyday lives, right? And the next generation of applications is going to depend on a myriad of different sensors and connected devices and things in order to carry out their basic tasks and functionality. So this implies that we're entering a world of low latency, high frequency, high volumes of data in order for those new applications to process effectively. I borrowed this from a company called Backblaze, who I use for backups of my desktop, but I think it's a great analogy. If we think of a petabyte, and I think most of the hyperscalers here understand this very well, but a petabyte is a couple of cabinets at 250K. An exabyte is a big data center, 4 stories, 2,000 cabinets, $250 million of infrastructure investment. And a single zettabyte is 1,000 data, 1,000 data centers, about 20% of the size of the city of Manhattan, and a cost of $250 billion. That means that if 10% of edge data forward-looking in the next few years is 250 zettabytes, it's a $62 trillion problem. That's 3 times the size of the national debt. That problem, the size of that problem and scale is untenable for all of the hyperscalers here in this building and for us. And we think fundamentally to solve that problem, computing is going to have to move much, much closer to where data is being generated. What we call the near edge, that's the last 1,000 feet to the actual end user mobile devices and connected things. We think of this as a new layer of cloud computing that is forming between centralized cloud today and the billions of IoT devices. So there'll be a near edge layer of fog or edge computing, which consists of millions and tens of millions of nodes that transacts with, processes data from the billions of IoT connected devices out there. The characteristics of this edge layer, this fog layer, are that it needs to be ephemeral. It's there when you need it, gone when you don't. Transparent, meaning that there's no special software required. A lot of the devices that are coming aren't capable of running sophisticated software. It needs to be instantaneous so they can respond to the environment in real time and make decisions in real time about what's happening. These systems are going to control our fire suppression systems in buildings like this, the pump that drives the water underneath the ground outside our feet, cars and other things. So we need it to be very, very responsive and critically accessible to really low power devices in terms of compute, because as Ali mentioned, we're at the ends of Moore's law, and that means that devices are going to get a lot smaller, but they're not necessarily going to get a lot smarter or faster in terms of their computing capacity. So we need to be able for those devices to access the edge seamlessly. So what we're doing at EdgeX, and again, you guys are the first broad audience to set eyes upon this, is we're taking, through our partner ITRenew and Sesame, the trusted, proven hyperscale infrastructure from Open Compute, refurbishing it, repurposing it, and into new form factors which can be deployed and are suitable for edge. So we're, I think, one of the first customers of the Discovery, which was unveiled today at the show, and you can see out in the exhibit hall, which contains 5 compute nodes, and he was just talking about a few minutes ago. And also an outdoor device, which is a submersion-cooled product called the Rugged Pod, which is also produced and owned by ITRenew. We're using that equipment to redeploy them into the world's largest edge computing platform. And when I say largest, I'm talking about number of points of presence out there. When we talk about the edge today, what people think of is a content delivery network may have 90, 100, maybe 150 points of presence in a geographic region designed to serve the last mile from a few miles away. We're talking about the near edge in the last 1,000, 2,000 feet to devices, putting these computing platforms anywhere and everywhere so that they can be accessed directly by IoT devices. Shot of the Sesame, as we saw earlier. We're going to have our logo on that, I'm told, at some point and be prototyped for us. This is a shot of the Rugged Pod. The Rugged Pod's been around, I believe, for 18 months or so. It's already part of the Open Compute project, and I think we'll, again, be one of the first commercial parties deploying the Rugged Pod. On top of these pods runs our software. And what our software does is to dynamically create a peer-to-peer overlay network so that each of these pods can coordinate the direction of HTTP requests to nearby compute. So in this way, we're creating a dynamic and transparent computing fabric. Any IoT device or computing system that's capable of issuing an HTTP request can execute serverless functions at the edge. And we are doing that completely secured by a blockchain, as security is a major concern for everyone, but of course, in particular in the edge use case, so that developers can be assured that the functions that they are developing are in fact the same functions that are getting executed at the edge of the network. We have witness nodes which witness those transactions, record the log data, et cetera, creating an immutable record of, if you want to think of it this way, a planetary scale global application trace. This enables us also to create new and disruptive economic models. Aideen was talking earlier about how the circular economy is going to create disruption. We're able to leverage the circular economy to deploy these edge pods at a low cost or no cost or on-demand basis. So rather than folks who want edge pods locally for their IoT having to purchase this infrastructure, they're able to get the infrastructure and pay for it on an on-demand basis. So in this way, developer utilization of the infrastructure is perfectly aligned with the infrastructure expense. And we think this is truly revolutionary in the edge computing space. It's also our aim to make this incredibly simple for developers to build and write planet scale applications. So this is a shot of our dashboard. At a glance, developers can write their code, develop them, push their code into our network, and their code becomes available on the entire network globally or on a subset of the network as they designate. At a glance, they can get a sense for how much they're spending, they can control those costs in real time, and they can trace their program's execution throughout the world as mobile devices are moving around, as things are coming and going ephemerally. Here's another shot of our GraphQL demo being executed at the edge on an edge pod. Okay. We're also very excited to announce a collaboration with Advizion Digital, which is a division of Worley Parsons, one of the world's largest developers of oil and gas projects, and together with Chainyard, who is a development solution expert based on the East Coast for blockchain. And what we're doing together is creating some of those next generation apps I talked about in the outset of this presentation to do things like use video as a sensor to detect leaks inside of an industrial setting. Taking that information and making it available on side of augmented reality devices like smart monocles on helmets to improve worker safety in these plants, monitoring fluid levels, pumps, other industrial assets to make sure that they are performing as they should be, all in real time. And the ambition of folks like Advizion and other software partners is to have the control systems respond in real time to the environment and to hand over, if you will, a lot of control to the software for the first time. And I have visited these facilities, and I can tell you it's amazing what they're doing. You can walk around the plant, look at any piece of equipment, heads-up display will tell you what it's doing. It's all being controlled with machine learning. It's just fascinating. Okay, last slide. So you can be one of the first to try EdgeX. We're now in early access. We have a limited early rolling access right now. So as our network deployment continues, we're going to grant a certain number of folks access to the network. So if you're a software developer or you know one and love one, please refer them to our website, have them sign up for early access. Secondly, visit our website if you're interested in having EdgePods located at your site. And we thank IC Renew very much for allowing us this stage time in their session. Thank you, Ali.
Thank you, James. We're excited about it. Just to wrap up, I know we're running a little short on time. Thank you, James, very much. We're super excited about EdgeX and the potential to scale to massive, massive amounts of nodes very quickly. Just to kind of summarize, right, we talked about circular data centers. We really believe that the time is now. We know there's massive opportunity from an upstream perspective. We've got these assets that are coming out that are not currently assets useful downstream very well. Sesame is the glue and the connective tissue that turns those into assets and actually catalyzes these downstream markets. So we think there's massive opportunity for everybody to maximize kind of lifetime value of assets, whether that means doing a better job of commanding downstream value for your existing assets at end of life, or whether that means leveraging recertified equipment as you scale your own environments. And we think there's a massive sustainability impact to doing all of this. So it's a beautiful thing when to maximize financial value actually coincides directly with maximizing sustainability. And we hope everybody comes and checks out Sesame in the booth, because it's here on display and pretty cool to see, because it's truly makes OCP available for everybody. Thank you, guys.